Hello and welcome to the How to Film Weddings podcast. My name is Nick Miller, and today we're having a conversation with our attorney Paige Hulse about everything COVID-19. Definitely going to want to check this one out. Make sure that you are covered. If you would like some additional resources, we recommend heading over to howtofilmweddings.com/law. That's howtofilmweddings.com/law. And there we have linked several resources that Paige has put together that can help you in your business. Let's go ahead and jump into this conversation with our attorney, Paige Hulse. Okay, we are recording. We tried to do Facebook Live, but it didn't work. So we're just going to upload this after the fact. So sorry, these questions are not live. We posted a thread yesterday asking about questions for our attorney, Paige Hulse, about COVID-19. So we're going to cover as much of the questions that you asked that we can during this time. Paige, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah, we're doing good. I have way more elbow room from last time whenever we did a podcast together, so I'm doing great.
John, I have to say this time is preferable to the last.
Yes.
The last time we had Paige on, her and John shared an office and even had to share headphones, one in each ear.
Got weird.
Because
It did to look straight ahead.
It was really fun. So, yes, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, we have lots of our clients that are freaking out because their weddings either cannot happen or they don't know if they should postpone. And lots of people are canceling rather than postponing. And us as, in the industry, we're not sure what we should do. And we're not sure what our contract states and if we're protected and if we have to give retainers back or not, that sort of thing. And, we want to not spread false information. So we wanted to have someone that actually knows the law and knows the business and knows what's going on to answer the questions that you have. So that's what we're going to do over the next hour or so, maybe a little more. Just ask the questions that you have posted in a thread from a couple days ago and then go over those. So let's just jump in. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Nick, before we do that, I have to be lawyerly and I have to give my disclaimer.
Okay.
And
be
that
lawyerly.
Just for 1 second here. And that is, while everything I'm talking about today, I hope is very informative, very helpful, very educational. It's just education. It is not specific legal advice for anybody and does not constitute any sort of client relationship between us. Sorry, you can proceed.
Okay. So this is just for your learningness, not. Yeah. All right. So let's start with this one. Andrew asked this question: if a couple reschedules to a date I'm already booked and I cannot find a replacement, am I still able to keep my retainer based on the wording of my contract?
Okay, so answering this question is going to be, there's a bit of a speculative aspect because I would have to actually look at your contract in order to tell you exactly, obviously, what language you have around your retainer. That being said, anytime, I'm going to repeat this probably until everyone's sick of hearing it throughout this conversation, but anytime that you are rescheduling anything with a client, you need to have a rescheduling agreement. That is critical for a lot of reasons. One is when you're rescheduling, you can have language in here. You can premeditate this type of language that states what happens if you can't find a replacement, if you can't find somebody to step in for you, that kind of stuff, so that you're protected ahead of time. The second reason why I want you to have a rescheduling agreement, among many reasons, is because I want you to have some sort of language within that agreement that constitutes a mutual release of the parties or between the parties relating to your previous contract. Because throughout this crazy scenario that we are in, there are too many changing circumstances for your prior contract to be completely applicable moving forward, even if it's just for a date change. I'll get into that a little bit more later. So anyways, my response to Andrew here is get a rescheduling agreement. Make sure that you have language that discusses that something along the lines that you are going to attempt to reschedule for this date that they're wanting, dependent upon whether or not you're able to find somebody to step in as a contractor or as a replacement.
Yep. Love it.
All
right.
Answer?
Hi,
Okay.
Paige. It's John.
Oh, hi, John.
I didn't get to say much at the beginning. So I'm just sitting here, lots of things have happened. I think a lot of us are in the same boat where it's like, we don't know what to do, and like kind of just feel like the wind has been taken out of our sails kind of thing. And so like I've been dealing with wedding planners and brides and grooms that want to switch dates. And so it's just like all this work and kind of mass hysteria. The news is making it seem like the world's going to end, all this stuff. So I'm really pumped that you're here. I know you and I talked yesterday just about my personal situation, everything that's going on with us. Life is good. But I do appreciate, I know how busy you are and the hundreds of people reaching out to you. So just want to say thanks before I ask you Matthew's question. So one of my favorite questions that we got asked yesterday, very similar to how Michael Scott asked Oscar about a budget on The Office. He says, explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old or whatever, but force majeure, those are two words that have been coming up a lot lately. And I really wanted, to start out this conversation kind of, he basically is asking, can you explain it to me like I'm a child? And in what situations would the vendor have to refund the couple's payments? What is it? Should we be worried about it? Just kind of give us all the deets when it comes to the force majeure.
I have to say, out of everything that we're going to be talking about today, the concept of force majeure is my number one reason why I'm so glad that you all are hosting this, because I am seeing so much misinformation floated around everywhere regarding force majeure. And I have a feeling that most people, that might be something that you saw in your contract, but not something that you ever paid any attention to until the last couple days.
Not till now.
Yeah, not till now. And now we're all really familiar with the concept of force majeure. So a force majeure provision in a contract is something that is the contract trying to contemplate something entirely unforeseen, something usually they're described as an act of God. I'm going to get into this kind of on a technical level just because, again, there's so much misinformation right now. So typically, force majeure provisions are going to cover something like, let's say, I always use the example of like Hurricane Harvey in Houston. That hit, I think, like on a Saturday on a wedding weekend, and some vendors literally were not able to get to the venue to, shoot the wedding, anything like that. I hate to break it to everybody. You need to stop looking at your force majeure provisions. This is not a force majeure scenario. It seems like an infestation or an infection, a pandemic would be an act of God. It's not considered an act of God. Right now, a lot of attorneys consider this an act of man. I will just real quick sidebar say we're in an unprecedented time for so many reasons, one of which is because our courthouses are closed, at least locally. So you have people already going to court about this to get clarity on this and to build that case law. And we're not able to get specific answers because literally, judges are not able to hear cases right now. So I want to this is one of the few times I'm going to get a little bit legal here. But I want to explain this provision. So if you are going to court to try to stand behind a force majeure provision saying that it became impossible for you to perform your services for the wedding or for the event, a court's going to look at whether or not that event qualifies as force majeure within the specific wording of the contract. I'll get back to that. They're going to look, and this is key, they're going to look at whether or not the risk of your non-performance was foreseeable and if you had a chance to mitigate that risk of non-performance. The third thing they're going to look at is whether or not performance was truly impossible, the performance as a whole. Okay, I'll get back to all of those in a second. They're mostly going to look at whether or not you could have mitigated or foreseen your non-performance, like I said, and whether or not it was impractical. So right now, COVID is not considered something, it wouldn't apply under any of those scenarios. Because if we just start from number one, most of your contracts likely don't have any sort of language in their force majeure provision discussing whether or not a pandemic is considered a force majeure event, or even more specifically, whether or not COVID-19 is considered a force majeure event. And in some jurisdictions, not in my own, but in some jurisdictions, judges have gotten that technical about it to see whether or not something like whether or not COVID-19 is actually listed specifically. Okay. So the second thing, like we said, the risk of non-performance, whether or not that was foreseeable and able to be mitigated. That right there is what hamstrings your entire argument around force majeure, because we had notice about this and then we had a declaration about this. The CDC put out a declaration stating that this was happening. So technically, we all had notice. And I've spoken to so many attorneys in the past couple of days. I was meeting with one yesterday regarding a case on this exact topic, and it's that fact that we had noticed, the fact that the weddings that maybe in let's say you're talking about rescheduling a wedding in early May. It's mid-March. You have notice before the wedding. You have time to mitigate it. You have time to basically work around it. So that leads us to point number 3. Your performance is technically not impossible, because you are able to reschedule. You are able to still provide your services even if they are not on that specific date. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I know I just threw a lot at you.
So
I want you to explain it to me like I'm 5 now that you've said all those things. Like
Okay.
I hear everything you're saying. I get it because I am a business-minded adult. But to people like no disrespect to anybody out there, but for real, I just want to like make it very clear and easy now that you've said all those things, like your bullet points.
So if it's not John Bunn, so if I'm talking to someone who's not John Bunn, how would I explain this?
Exactly.
Okay. So John, I get to pick on you now. So John, have you heard of the coronavirus?
I have once, yes.
John, have you heard anything about the CDC putting out any notice that the coronavirus is considered a pandemic?
I have very much heard that as well. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, and then John, do you have a wedding scheduled in a few weeks from now? A wedding any time other than today?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So because of that, you have time before that wedding occurs to help change the date, transfer your services to another time, maybe provide for supplemental or replacement services by somebody else. Technically, your bride and groom can still get videography services on the day of their wedding.
Yep.
You are not being actually forcibly locked in your office right now by the government, not allowed to leave. So technically, you have notice, and it's not impossible.
Yep.
Now, whether or not it's prudent is we're going to get into that.
So at least before any of the COVID-19 stuff showed up, okay, that is how the government the law interprets force majeure, is that because we have ample time, because as of right now, we're not on like martial law and lockdown, and like we're able to leave our houses and that kind of stuff, that those clauses do not give our clients their money back. Like,
that is correct.
Okay. At least today, as of how we were recording this and how we interpret it today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, things are changing. I've never had a time in my career where I've had to watch the news in order to make sure that each hour I'm giving clients like updated information. So this could change, but as of today, examples of it, first of all, it's really hard, and it's historically been nearly impossible to ever use a force majeure as an actual defense if you're arguing your contract. Examples of it are, like I said, Hurricane Harvey was a hurricane, like Hurricane Katrina that wiped out the city. 9/11, when you look at a force majeure, you usually see phrasing about word of God, acts of God, or you see phrasing talking about acts of terrorism, hostilities, war, that kind of stuff. 9/11 fell under that scenario. Mm-hmm. Outside of something that extreme, it's not impossible. Or your performance is not impossible, especially if you don't have if you don't have coronavirus. I mean, then you really don't have any leg to stand on with this. So okay. I can wax poetic about force majeure provisions, but I don't think anybody wants me to. And that's here's the thing, that shouldn't be the crux of our conversation at all, because that's kind of, that's a distractor that a lot of people don't realize it's not actually making any practical difference in their business. in figuring out these scenarios.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Me ask a question, John?
Sure. I asked the last one, so I just assumed.
You did.
I'm sorry.
You did. Okay. James asked this question. I think the main question on everyone's mind right now that I'm seeing is the term non-refundable retainer. Everyone has different takes on this. Some say to be a good person and refund it. Some people say stay firm. Some people say that due to coronavirus, the verbiage will not protect you, while others say, no, the verbiage will protect you. So what does non-refundable retainer mean in a situation, and legally, does it allow all vendors to stand firm because the contract says so?
Great question. And there are lots of kind of subtopics within this question. So first, I obviously can't, again, unless I'm actually looking at somebody's contract, I can't say, oh yeah, it definitely stands up or not. Anytime I'm looking at a contract, no matter how brilliantly one paragraph is drafted, I have to look at the entire contract, because it's like a puzzle. Different provisions can impact other provisions. I have to look at it as a whole. So that being said, it depends on the strength of your contract. You better hope you had a contract drafted by an attorney at this point. Because non-refundable is that's tricky wording, tricky to uphold, but it can be upheld. I have seen a lot of contracts this week, especially the ones that I've drafted for my clients, where they absolutely can stand behind that non-refundable language. However, again, I highly advise that you go to an attorney in your state, because contract laws differ state by state on little nuanced levels. I want you to go to an attorney in your state, and I want you to have them review it and tell you definitively whether or not. Kind of going to the middle of this question, some people say that due to coronavirus, the verbiage won't protect you. Just that lends itself back to our conversation about force majeure. That's not factual at all. I've had a couple clients this week who have had people threaten to sue them if they don't return all of their non-refundable payments that are actually non-refundable, because in their words, the coronavirus is just too extreme for a contract. That is not a valid argument. Something that is emotional, like the coronavirus, this is an emotional national emergency. There's a lot of anxiety around it. I'm not mitigating that point at all, but that has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not, the sky is blue and the grass is green and the contract is still a contract. Like, it just has no bearing on it at all. One thing that I spoke to, I was actually speaking to John about this yesterday, just kind of, this isn't any sort of like legal insight, but something that I'm encouraging people to think about is when you're deciding whether or not you're going to deposit, I want you to consider two things when you're talking about whether or not you're going to return non-refundable retainers or payments to your clients. One, I want you to remember that you're probably trying to reschedule, unless they're difficult, you're trying to reschedule these services for another time. So thinking like a business owner, you want to create some sort of incentive that makes them want to reschedule with you and not be furious with you. So if I were you, I would send some sort of, in my discussion or in my emails with them, I would say something about the fact that, according to this paragraph, this language or the retainer and payments are non-refundable. However, I know that this is a highly emotional time. I know that this wedding day is, an incredibly important event. So I want to do the best to take care of both of us in this scenario. And I'm willing, you don't have to do this, but I think it's smart to be willing to maybe split the difference and maybe refund some of their payments, but retain that, your retainer or deposit yourself. Second thing I want you to think about is, as a wedding vendor, as a videographer, you are, no matter what, you are always going to be working with other vendors at events. And I really think that there's a networking perspective that shouldn't be overlooked here. Again, this is just like my opinion, so I apologize for that. It has nothing to do with the law. But if you're going to just give all of every payment up, even if you don't want to, even if the client knows that you don't have to, but they just bully you into it anyways, I think that it's wise to think about the other vendors involved and what type of position that puts them in, like wedding planners, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll just say, then think about how willing or excited they would be to work with you again in the future. Again, that's not a make it or break it deciding factor, but I think that's just something that should go into your decision-making process.
Yep.
Long
Agreed.
answer, sorry.
Yes. Did that answer all the questions and sub-questions?
I think so.
I think so. I think so.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll ask the next one here. It's inevitable that something like this will happen again. As videographers, how can we make sure that for next time our contracts are solid? What can we learn from this that we can now add into our contracts moving forward? Or what are the things that we might not have in there now that we absolutely need to include for the next virus or pandemic that comes our way?
Great question. First, you don't have to listen to anything else I say today. If this doesn't teach you that you should go to an attorney and have them draft, review, revise, look at your contract, I don't know what will. And I'm obviously opinionated about that, but I hope that this shows that you're running a business, and sometimes you need professional business advice on the nuances of the legalities involved. So please go to an attorney in your state. Please go to an attorney in your state. In terms of what can we add to our contracts to make, if this happens again, so you can add language into your force majeure provision, declaring that a pandemic would be considered, or even specifically naming the coronavirus would be considered a force majeure event under the contract. However, again, going back to our conversation about force majeure, that will still be a hard argument to overcome, just because we're still going to have to run up against the question of impossibility and basically notice, was it foreseeable? So there's no magic language that you can include to cover yourself in the future, but there are ways that you can strengthen that contract. There are different provisions. Of course, your retainer deposit paragraph. Obviously, this is teaching us how crucial the wording of that provision is. There are other little points that you can look for, like assumption of risk. Your limitation of liability clause is crucial. Anything that can basically indemnify you in these types of events, your cancellation and termination provisions, you need to go through them with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that you're not stuck in a position like this in the future where it's worse than being between a rock and a hard place. But that is a very long conversation. That's something I want your attorney in your state to answer for you. I do have a free guide on my website that has an actual bullet point list of what I would look for if you were to pay me to look at your contract. So if you want, I can link that later for you guys, but you need to look for specific provisions that are to be included within the contract.
Just as a side note, quick plug at howtofilmweddings.com/law, LAW. Everything that we're talking about will be linked there just to make it easy, all the stuff to get to Paige's contracts and things like that. So if you're listening, you need, contracts, all those kinds of things, the bullet points, the blogs, howtofilmweddings.com/law to help you guys out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go there. Check that out. That's a good idea.
Check it out.
Check it out. Here's another one. Outside of contracts, what can we do from a legal perspective to protect our clients, companies, and money if and when this happens again? Also, is there anything we can do to this chaos as a platform to elevate our business, marketing, and effectiveness from a legal side of things?
Let's see. I'll handle marketing is not my wheelhouse. I'll just say that. So
I didn't figure it was, but that was the question.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question to be asking, but I'll let you ask it. You guys can answer that part later.
We can answer it later.
Yeah. In terms of what you can do from a legal perspective, again, I really hope that this scenario has taught everybody that we need to run our businesses like businesses and I don't mean that as a cliche. I mean that so literally. You need to have an LLC in place. You need to have all of those assets separated from your personal and family assets. You don't want to put the rest of your family at risk if you now have 25 people trying to reschedule and threatening to sue you. This needs to be an entirely separate entity that can carry its own liability from your personal liability. To protect our clients, companies, and money. This, I might be jumping ahead a bit, guys, so you just tell me to stop talking if you want to. But when we're talking
I'm
about—
not going to do that.
That's a trick question. Good job. When we're talking about how to protect our clients, this is going to be a critical client relationship time for us all. And the way that we speak to our clients through this and guide them through this is again, it's just absolutely critical. I will say I have reached out to a copywriter, and she is actually helping draft up more eloquent versions of some language that I have written for my own clients this week as they are talking to their clients, navigating this, notifying their clients that cancellations and rescheduling might be on the horizon, comforting them in the process, and just letting them know that they are being taken care of. So that's something that'll be linked on that page as well when it's done. That being said, the CDC, at the time of recording this, the CDC has put out guidelines. It's not a law, stating that this is basically, we're looking at an 8-week time frame. This is not something this is more of a business opinion rather than a legal opinion. I think that it's very, very wise for you to reach out to the people that you have scheduled within that 8-week period and offer them kind of like first dibs on rescheduling. And you don't have to necessarily tell them that you are canceling the event yet, because depending on where you are and what state and local executive orders have gone out, that's going to vary no matter whatever city you're in. But I think that it's wise to go ahead and put that in place now, in case that we do find ourselves in a scenario where in some sort of like lockdown or something like that, just so that that's already taken care of. We have no idea how long this is going to last. The gray area of this is obviously the hardest part. So that's why I think taking care of the people in that first 8-week period first is wise. Give them first dibs. And then if you want to look at maybe your clients in that next 8-week period, which would be from like mid-May through, I don't know, kind of like the rest of the summer, do the same thing with them. And again, tell them that it's not a requirement that they change their date, but maybe tell them that you're trying to take care of them before that becomes a necessity. So that's something I've seen a lot of clients have success with this week. And so I just wanted to pass that along.
It's good advice.
And I think along those lines, I think that if you as a business owner get ahead of the situation and you present options and say, hey, I'm here for you. Do you have any questions? Like, I think that alleviates a lot of tension. And like, I know all of we have one wedding in April and 3 in May, and then a couple at the beginning of June. And I emailed all of them and just touched base with them and let them know.
I think that's great.
And they were all like, thank you so much, for reaching out to us and just letting us know you're here. And I think that if you do that, that will build a better relationship with them, so that if you have to reschedule or we come to these conversations about, getting money back or anything like that, that those, I think, will be handled differently if you are the one bringing it up. It's like, telling on yourself that you did something to your parents rather than them finding out and having to come to you. It's kind of that
yeah,
sort of
thing. That's good. Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. This is what we're entering into, no matter if we have to reschedule or not. You're entering into a long-term negotiation. So start it off on the right foot. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
All right. So Michael asks, moving on, what happens when the couple books a new date without consulting in us and we are not available?
Okay, so I might be too blunt here, but honestly, when I first saw this question, I was wondering how on earth they could do that without I don't know how, unless you have some sort of like automatic sign up form on your website type thing that allows them to book on on the site. I don't know, something like that. You would look at your terms and conditions, but I guess, is this question more from the perspective of if they book like the venue, the same venue, the same?
I think he's asking, like, I have a bride, like he has a bride booked, and then they went and changed their date without consulting in them. And
So they
then,
have, okay.
And then they
like they're booked already. Like,
okay. So I misread that when I first saw
happened
that.
to me. Yeah, like where the bride is moving it to a date later in the future where I'm personally booked already. This guy, Michael, I think is a solo shooter, so he's now not available.
Mm-hmm.
And they booked a date without consulting in him. What legally does he rights does he have? I think when coming, like paying back, or like what happens when they book a new date without consulting us and we're not available?
Okay. I apologize. I misread that question at first. So the first point here is that you cannot amend a contract unilaterally. So that works both ways. The client here would not be able to amend the contract, meaning the date of the services, without getting this person's permission. So they have technically breached their contract with you, and you are not required to comply with that breach. So what you would need to do, one, is if you do find a way to make this work, you would need to enter into a new agreement. Second thing, and John, if you want to kind of, I think that you and I were talking about this the other day. I might be confusing people at this point, but a lot of people have found themselves in this position, like you said, and something that I have seen a lot of people do is reach out to other videographers, other photographers, and see if someone can step in and not second shoot, but step in as a contractor there. And you, as the videographer that they hired, edit the film and, give them the final product of that. This is something I've seen a lot in the photography world in the last couple of days. This is where, of course, this is going to come to a shock to everybody. I am not that well equipped when it comes to shooting weddings. I'm not that familiar with the process, but I think that it would be very similar to that of photography, and you would be able to have a contractor that could come in, and then you just are able to create a final product that's more in line with your portfolio. That seems like, from a business perspective, the best way to salvage the relationship, the best way not to completely lose out on the business, and the best way to make the client happy.
Yeah. I do have a couple of thoughts. That is a good, that's what I'm looking to do for one of my weddings that moved and went ahead and booked a date without consulting in me. And I run a company that does have multiple teams and multiple lead shooters available. The editing style is the same. We all, that is going to hopefully be the way that this situation turns out with this couple. I'm still meeting with them. But I think that just to take it one layer deeper with him, him asking kind of like what happens if they do book a new date, if he doesn't want to do that. Like, I mean, that you're saying that they are in breach of contract. Mm-hmm. What does he do in that situation if he doesn't want to hire somebody else? Or like, can he just say, I'm going to be available for the original date and I get to keep all of your money? Obviously you have to balance that business, but like, is that legally what he can do at this point?
That's exactly right. And then taking it a step further than that, if he's not able to find somebody, if he's not going to be able to, adhere with this new date at all, again, they are in breach of contract. In order to completely sever the contract, he needs to enter into a termination agreement. This termination agreement is going to be absolutely critical in these types of scenarios, again, because it has that mutual release language, and you don't want any excessive or extra liability hanging out there that you could have technically under that first contract. You want that first contract that they've now breached to become null and void, so that you don't have any responsibilities left or any questions, just any loose liability hanging out there. So the termination agreement, rescheduling agreements, I'm going to talk about a lot, but they are so critical, because somebody could come back in this scenario and they could create people don't have to necessarily have a foolproof case to be able to take you to court. It's that there are times when, unfortunately, justice and reality don't quite align with with the legal system. So that's a soapbox I won't get on.
And one thing that I'm thinking of is we're treating this different because the virus and the pandemic and everything is something that we haven't dealt with. But if this were a random Tuesday and the virus stuff wasn't going on and someone said, hey, I'm moving my wedding date, like if you remove the virus stuff out of it, I think people would be dealing with this a lot differently. But because that's like overhead and people are thinking about and people are talking about, like they're treating it differently. Whenever if you like sit down and objectively and logically looked at it, it's really the same thing.
That's
right?
exactly right. Yep. Yeah, that is exactly right. I'm glad you said that, because that's something that sometimes we have to say out loud to remind ourselves, because it feels like we're kind of living in the twilight zone a little bit right now.
Yeah. Here's another one. We good to keep going? Yep. Rebecca says, I have a wedding coming up that it is photo and video package, all included in one contract and invoice. If it's rescheduled and I'm available for one, but I can't find a team to cover the other, what do I owe to refund? Do I have to refund the whole video portion of the package, or can I mathematically deduct the retainer portion from the video part of the package to keep the wedding is in a couple of months out and they're not being forced to postpone anything yet? In the future, should I contract and invoice the two packages separately if I'm hired for both? Okay,
so again, this is going to 100% depend upon the language in your contract. I don't have an answer for that. However, in terms of how to handle it at this point, you're going to have to work out a deal with your client on that. I won't take it so far as to say that you need to have some sort of settlement agreement in place, but again, you need to have some sort of agreement in place that is similar to the language I keep talking about in these termination and rescheduling agreements, that releases you of the liability if, let's say you aren't able to find somebody to cover the photography side. You can just have some sort of agreement in place with them, releases you of liability, sets forth the conditions for your future services, which are going to be just the video, just whatever you are able to provide. Yeah. I did not answer that well. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does. I think that most people, like for me, I have video and photo and it is one contract, but you've looked through it, and like what you're saying about needing to look through the contract. I think that, again, we'll come back to it again and again, just regarding like you have templates and things for sale, but also people live in different states and there's different rules and different laws. And so you can purchase a template from Paige and then have a local attorney look at it, or have Paige look at it based on where you're living. But I think that's it's very specific. And
it is.
So, I mean, I think that's as much as you can answer about that.
Yeah.
And hopefully this is telling people, hey, you need to, like, I think a lot of times people are like, well, I don't have the money to have an attorney involved, or I don't have the money to, do any of these kinds of things. I'll do this when ... And it's like, if you're going to be in business, like this virus, if anything, is really separating people that are running businesses from people that are kind of playing business. And this is very, very serious. And I don't mean to disrespect anybody that's listening, but when you're starting up your business, this is a cost that you need to factor in to legally, and I didn't do this when I got started. And if I could be starting all over again, it's like I would 1,000,000% do this right from the beginning. It would have saved me tens of thousands of dollars. And so if you're not, quarterly or, a couple times a year, just having your attorney just relook at everything, make sure everything's up to date, and just having someone in your corner, like we do in Paige, like, yes, it costs money, but it's the same thing that we're telling people when it comes to, hiring a professional to shoot video. Yes, you can film your wedding on a phone, but you're going to get what you pay for. And so to anyone out there that is really wondering, it's like, this has to be a priority over new cameras, new lights, new anything, because something like this, if you don't do it right, can literally, if you're not legally protected, can take everything from you. They can sue you and take all your business away. Or if you're not protected in your entity, you can get your home taken away, or it's like, this is,
and that's
no
real.
joke.
Yeah. It's, of course, I have a lot of things to say about this, but thank you for saying that, John. this, I'll just tell you, I have a client going through this right now. The client, well, first I didn't draft their contract, but they did everything right. They just ended up with a jerk of a client. Okay. Who has enough money to get, I feel like we all probably have stories like this. The client, especially if you're charging a premium price for your services, go ahead and expect the client to have money. Enough money where if they get mad at you and if their ego and their pride and their emotions are involved in this, they'll hire a lawyer even if you are right, they'll hire a lawyer just to wreck you. And that sounds horrible, but it happens, and it happens all the time. And it's literally like it has happened to clients of mine this week. And litigation is a whole different ball game. And here's the deal. You can have that happen and you can throw up your hands and say, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't want to fight about it anymore. You can have whatever you want. If you're in litigation, you don't get to do that. You have to stick it out. It's like, you're not able to just bow out of it. It's horrible. And then you have to hire somebody to start defending you. Again, even if you're right, you still are going to end up paying tens of thousands of dollars just to tell the world that you're right. And I hate talking like that because it sounds like a fear-mongering type of scenario, but it truly is happening to my clients. Just again, because we're talking about something highly, highly emotional. And when you mentioned, John, that contract laws are different in every state, they are. And I'm going to keep saying that. The reason why I have created the template shop that I have is because it takes a lawyer anywhere. I would say most of the templates, like my videography template, took about 18 hours to draft. So if you're billing at, anywhere from $200 to $500 an hour times 18 hours, that'll be an expensive contract. If you get something strong enough to start as an actual good foundation and then take it to an attorney, don't build it up in your mind as having to suddenly spend $10,000 to get a contract. They might just need an hour to review it for you. And I'm pretty sure that a couple $100 hour charge to review something like that is worth more than, where else can you spend money and get that type of return on investment, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's if you're not using a lawyer at this point, I always say that a contract is like a seatbelt for your business. And to me, this scenario should teach you, like, if you're not using that seatbelt, a car crash is going to result very differently for you.
Yep. Very true. All right. I want to get back on point here. Good stuff. Good conversation. Michael asks, upon a successful reschedule date due to the virus, do you suggest sending new contracts to sign with the updated dates? Is the prior contract void because of the date changing?
That is a really, really good question. And I'm glad that he asked this question. So what I would suggest in this scenario, again, because we have heightened emotions around it, your technically the prior contract is not completely null and void. I can get into a very long discussion. I won't here. What I would recommend him doing is getting the rescheduling agreement, getting that in place, getting that signed, and then having your client re-enter into a new contract, which is your old contract, but just have them sign the same thing, but start over with a brand new one. And that's just because we have so many other factors involved here, questions around force majeure, and just there are a lot of other factors involved rather than just the date change. Typically, I would say it's okay to just amend it and just to amend with that date change. But I think we need to operate very conservatively and just play it safe here.
And so, to add to that, I would say get that new contract signed before, it's like, if you're getting a new insurance policy, you want to get that insurance policy in place first before you cancel the other one. So if you are going to void the other contract, would you agree, Paige, that get the new date signed, scheduled, and then have them sign something canceling the old one? Or
that's why, I was talking to somebody about this morning. You can present both at the same time. So you can send them the rescheduling agreement that just says, hey, this puts an end to our original one. And then if you're using HoneyBook, literally load them both and just send one after another. Keep them separate, but I would sign the rescheduling one first.
Okay.
Sorry, Nick, what were you going to say?
No, my question was along the same lines of that. So that was good. That was good. Cliff asks, does the contract language need to specifically say that the retainer is non-refundable? And if it does, should it legally be refunded if it does not, should it legally be refunded if it's requested? Did I say that right?
Yes. Yes, it needs to, there's no presumption of law that makes a retainer or deposit non-refundable. The contract has to specifically say so.
Okay.
The answer's that simple.
Okay.
So if you've written in your contract, like the retainer is this much, but it does not say non-refundable, and the couple asks for their money back,
it will not.
You're whoopsie. That's a scar on your back. You get to learn the hard way.
It's one of those things where one word in a contract can change a whole lot.
So if you're listening, push pause, go look at your contract, just make sure that it says not even non-refundable.
And it's not even a full word. It's like a prefix.
Yeah.
On.
I know.
Like it's not a.
Yes. I mean, that saved me. I know that, Paige and I have been through a couple of cases in the past couple of years where I've dealt with some, clients that I wish that I wouldn't have had to deal with, and just having strong, clear wording that has been written and everything through, Paige and me looking at it together, like has given me a confidence to know that I'm covered and know that I'm safe. And I think that like this whole coronavirus thing for me, it's scary. I'm watching stock markets go down, all this stuff, but I ultimately have a piece that I'm just like, well, I know that I'm good and I'm taken care of. And so if you're listening, push pause, go look at your contract. If you have something in place, this is like, I know that most attorneys out there are quite busy right now, but it is now. Start paying attention to these contracts and making sure that you have the right verbiage in them. All right, enough about that. Sorry.
And again, another plug, howtofilmweddings.com/law. We have links to some of Paige's stuff that you can check out there. If you need a new contract, like she said, purchase that, then take that one to your lawyer, and it's a good starting point. Worth the few $100s that you would spend rather than thousands and thousands if you contact a lawyer and said, hey, write this contract for me. So
yep.
Right now with the rush fee.
right do it. I need it yesterday.
Yeah.
All right. BJ asks, he says, a client called and asked for the retainer back and threatened me, and I gave in and said I would refund. Do I still have to? Contract says non-refundable deposit for any reason, including acts of God.
Okay, so I think that we've covered the act of God portion of that probably pretty thoroughly by now. Okay, so we're kind of getting, you're flirting with the concept of an oral contract here, and that's a really hard thing to uphold. This is where you need to put your business hat on. And from a legal perspective, I haven't seen your contract. I won't keep saying that, but from a legal perspective, I can't really lend much insight on this, because if you called and told the client that you were going to give that money back, they could technically have grounds to say it was a verbal agreement. Who knows if they were recording you or anything like that. You did do something that goes counter to your original language in your contract, no matter what. So no matter what, you have to have a termination agreement that states what you two are deciding to and releases you from liability of the original contract. Does that make sense?
I think so.
So get a termination agreement, decide what you really want to stick to, make sure it's written down.
Okay.
Yeah. And as a business owner, if you've told them you're going to give it back, again, to me, that is something you probably should do it, because that's going to end up costing you more money in the bad press that you're going to get. But as a reminder, we are business owners, and you do have to put that business hat on, and you have to stick to your contract. I mean, you have to stick to that, because if not, your business could literally fold, because you're, oh yeah, I'll give you your money back, I'm a nice guy. Or it's like that, like we could not have seen this coming. Like there's no way. And so this is why you have this contract in place. And so, yeah.
It's good timing.
Oh man. The times that has happened to John, I can't
That's
tell
funny.
you, where we're just talking and then his lights just turn off. It's like he doesn't
I was
pay for
rushing around
electricity.
here last minute to like get everything set up due to the fact that I've been at home quarantined all week. Sorry. But I'm back with light.
Glad to have you back, John.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
Nick's
this
your
is
turn, man.
this is. Did you add this last big kind of bullet point thing, Paige?
Yeah, those are some questions I got this morning from people. So
Okay.
Cool.
In the case that a client wants to cancel their wedding and our services, are we held responsible for giving back the retainer that they paid due to force majeure situation? I think you've covered that.
I think we have. No, we're not going to. Yeah, no more force majeure.
Okay.
That won't have any bearing.
Okay. Do you want me to go into these things, or are they?
With the workshop question, that depends on you. I don't know how many people in your audience this would apply to. I know that there are conferences and people trying to figure out what to do with that. But so really kind of the gist, not to take over your question here,
no,
but
you take it. You take it.
the crux of this question that I wanted to bring up here is we spoke earlier a little bit about that, the 8-week period. We're in this gray area. We don't know how long these CDC guidelines are going to be in place. So if we're looking past that 8-week period, how do we handle it? I still think that it's wise to have some sort of figure out how you want to handle this as a business and have those guidelines in place for those June, July clients, or if you're a workshop host for your attendees. If their clients start thinking about what type of rescheduling offers you want to give them, I would highly suggest that you cap it at ending at 2020, just for financial reasons. But if you want to offer them any date, past that in the fall of 2020, anything like that, I would go ahead and do that. If you're hosting a conference, I would start thinking, I'm sure you all have talked about this, but if this can teach us anything, it's that sometimes as business owners, we need to get really creative about thinking how we can provide new solutions to new problems. So rather than just deciding to cancel, or rather than just deciding to keep it, if it's something like June and July where we don't really know what's going to be going on, then start thinking, especially if you're videographers, start thinking about what you would want to do if you could provide like a recording. And maybe people have paid an initial deposit to attend the conference or workshop or something like that. What if that deposit just applies for their payment for getting a recording rather than attending in person? Just think outside the box is really what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah. That's really good.
Can you ask this last thing here?
Yeah.
This next to last question?
Yeah.
So this one's yeah, we can ask that one. Yeah. I was talking about that last bullet point. Is that the same thing here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. Again, just that. So this question came from a client this morning, and she has a couple threatening to sue her if they don't give back if she does not give back the deposit. I wrote her contract under the terms she doesn't have to give anything back at all. We went with what I had mentioned earlier and was talking about splitting the difference, providing those later payments as a refund, but keeping the deposit. And then she got an email this morning that the client is threatening to sue her. What I want to relay with this question is I just want us to, this is going to be a scary time. We're going to be talking about, this is a highly emotional time. This is really going to show clients' true colors if they're litigious type of people. I just want to remind people to take a step back and look at things from a practical perspective. And if someone's threatening to sue you to get a $1,400 deposit back, they're going to have to pay a lawyer like $3,000 to do it. So I just want to remind people of that. My only point here is just don't initially panic. Please reach out to a lawyer in your state and talk to them about it, but please don't panic.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of us make decisions in a panic state. And, if you're making decisions when you're panicked, whenever you do calm down, you're going to be really mad that you made those decisions, or really feel like a horse's patoot. Sorry about my language there.
Yeah, we want to take all emotion out of all decision-making processes during this time, because your clients will have enough of it.
Yeah. What's that thing that Dave Ramsey's been saying? Don't make long-term decisions on short-term crises, or, like, don't make a life-changing decision today based on what happened with the stock market yesterday, like that kind of stuff. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been telling people, don't make short-term decisions to open up long-term liability.
All right, we have one more question over from Instagram. If you don't follow us on Instagram, just search How to Film Weddings. Paige is active over there on the IGs as well. Smokey2041 asked, I heard a deposit can be refunded but not a retainer. What is the difference between non-refundable deposit versus retainer?
The first part of this question, can a deposit be refunded but not a retainer? That is not true. If you have proper language specifying that either your deposit or your retainer is non-refundable, that is in fact what it is. What's the difference between a deposit versus a retainer? I have a blog post about this if you want to go read about it. It's a very, very nuanced difference. This is one of those scenarios where each state, there's not a ton of case law around it. Different states have different opinions on this. So what I've done with every contract I've written is I got creative with it, and I referred to it as the initial payment, because if a court is looking at this contract and trying to decide whether or not to uphold your non-refundable deposit or retainer, what they're looking at is, did the client know it was non-refundable? Did they know that that was the initial payment? And did they know why they had to pay that and why it was non-refundable? And the answer to that is, there has to be some money involved in order to reserve that spot on your calendar. So that's literally all you have to say in the contract is the client understands that this is non-refundable because this books the videographer's, the client's spot on the videographer's calendar.
Great.
Yes. Cool. Love it.
So, yeah.
Well, there's all of the questions that we have. We've been chatting for a good time, about an hour. So, again, if you do have legal questions about your contract, we highly recommend, checking out a lawyer in your state. I think Paige said that on Monday when all this went down, she got something like 85 inquiries or something like that. So lawyers are busy right now. So just be mindful of all of that, but definitely check it out. Again, if you go to howtofilmweddings.com/law, we have a few of Paige's resources that you can link and read those and check some of that stuff out. Purchase contract templates from her. But again, this is going to be a good starting spot if you live in a different state other than Oklahoma, so that you can take that to your lawyer and get the right information, get the right verbiage and wording and all of that stuff in it. But it's a great starting point. Paige, thank you for taking the time to talk with us in this very uncertain time right now. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you all trying to get some real information out there. So I think it's going to do people a lot of good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Well, you're awesome. If you're out there listening, go follow Paige. We'll link in the notes and everything where you can find her. And I would just throw it out there. If you're not an attorney, please stop giving legal advice online. We know you're trying to help, but this is not the time for you to be putting your armchair quarterback, to the test. You're not a backseat driver right now. Leave this to the professionals. Please stop posting legal advice. And if you're listening, definitely get somebody that knows what they're doing, that gets paid to do this, so you can save your butt. That's all I have, Nick.
Yep, that's great.
That is a great note to end on.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening. And until next time, we shall see ya.
We'll see ya.